Arguments are like battles, easy to start and inexplicably satisfying to win. But listen, winning isn't always about being right. It can be about being smarter, sharper, and sometimes ruthless. Meet Arthur Schopenhauer, a philosopher who didn't just accept the ugliness of human nature, he reveled in it. His essay, The Art of Being Right, is less about truth and more about power, ego, and the ruthless psychology behind why we argue the way we do. Hey, rockers! Today, we're breaking down 7 of Schopenhauer's most devastating strategies. Techniques that won't just help you dominate debates, but also reveal why arguments hit the deepest, most ego-driven parts of human nature. These tactics aren't always honest. They're sharp, manipulative, and brutally effective. And whether you use them or not, that's on you. Are you ready to rock? Let's rock that wisdom!
If you admit your opponent's premises, you must accept their conclusion. Hence, premises must be attacked.
Arguments are like Jenga towers. They rely on their premises to stay upright. Schopenhauer's advice: don't waste time polishing the top blocks. Go straight for the bottom and yank it out like a pro. Then watch the whole damn thing come crashing down in glorious defeat. This tactic taps into a brutal truth about human nature. Most arguments aren't built on solid logic. They're held together by duct tape assumptions, those lazy cognitive shortcuts we use to simplify the world, but fall apart under pressure. Schopenhauer knew that by exposing those flimsy foundations, you could blow a hole in anyone's argument and send their logic straight to hell. Schopenhauer absolutely torched Hegel's core belief that abstract systems could reveal universal truths. He called it a colossal piece of mystification and trickery built on circular reasoning and completely detached from reality. To Schopenhauer, Hegel's philosophy was basically a Jenga tower of intellectual bullshit, and yanking out the bottom block was just too damn satisfying. But smashing their foundation is just the warm-up. If you really want to seize control, it's time to take their words and twist them to your advantage.
If the dispute is concerning the meaning of a word, you must subtly change its meaning to suit your purpose.
Words are weapons, and Schopenhauer knew it. If you control the definition, you control the debate. Redefining terms isn't just clever, it's a total power move. Let's say someone calls you selfish. Don't deny it, own it. If putting myself first is selfish, then selfishness is just knowing I'm awesome. You should try it sometime. It might fix that martyr complex. Boom! You've redefined selfishness. Now they're stuck defending their sad little insult while you've already flipped the whole debate on its head. This tactic works because language isn't neutral. It's a loaded weapon packed with emotion. By reframing terms, you're not just owning the argument, you're hacking how people feel about it. Words like selfish come preloaded with emotional baggage, and if you redefine them, you're rewriting the narrative. Schopenhauer knew that facts alone don't win debates. Narratives do. When people called him a pessimist, he didn't break a sweat. Instead, he doubled down, arguing that what others saw as pessimism was simply clear-eyed realism. Optimism? That was naive fantasy. And just like that, he suddenly wasn't a bitter old pessimist throwing shade. He was the only guy brave enough to stare life's ugliness in the face and call it like it is. You now know how to fuck with words, but there's so much more. Want to turn their logic against them? That's where Schopenhauer really shines. His next move shows you exactly how to pull it off.
Extend your opponent's argument to the point where it becomes absurd, and they must then retract it.
Schopenhauer believed that sometimes the best way to disarm an argument is to let it disarm itself. This tactic is for when you're feeling extra devious. Take their logic, crank it to the extreme, and let it collapse under its own ridiculous weight. Example: someone says, carbs are ruining our health. You hit back with, perfect. Let's ban bread, potatoes and rice and we'll all survive on kale and air. Suddenly, they're scrambling to explain themselves while you sip your beer and order extra fries. Schopenhauer's brilliance here is in showing that most arguments can't survive their own extremes. It's not just about proving them wrong. It's about letting their logic self-destruct like a house of cards in a wind tunnel. By pushing their reasoning too far, you expose just how flimsy it really is. But sometimes, torching their logic isn't enough. If you really want to leave them reeling, you've got to hit them where it hurts.
A slight push provokes your opponent into a state of passion, which you can then use against them.
Want to win an argument? Strike a nerve. Hit where it stings. Schopenhauer knew that any passionate opponent, angry, flustered, humiliated, or desperate, is an irrational one. And irrational people, they lose. Here's how to do it. Just slip in a subtle insult or trap them in an embarrassing contradiction. You might say something like, I see where you're coming from. It's a common mistake. That little jab will spark anger, frustration, or even pride-driven defensiveness. Suddenly, they're spiraling into an emotional mess while you stay calm and smug. Schopenhauer understood that emotions, not logic, are the gas that fuels most arguments. Desperation makes people overreach. Humiliation makes them defensive. Anger, it makes them reckless. Play their emotions right, and you're not just wrecking their argument, you're exposing that their position was emotional all along and flipping the whole fucking game in your favor. But be careful. Take a look at what happened to Schopenhauer. Schopenhauer called Fichte
a charlatan who deceives the public,
and dismissed Hegel as a
dull-witted and clumsy charlatan.
When frustrated with the general state of philosophy, he let loose.
They are all idiots, and if there were only one of them, he would hang himself out of sheer boredom.
But here's the thing. While these insults were aimed at making them angry, Hegel and Fichte didn't take the bait. They ignored him completely. The lesson? This tactic works best in the heat of live arguments, where egos flare and tempers snap. So if that's not the case, here comes another real power play. Ready?
If you cannot make your case, you may turn the argument to something else entirely.
For instance, someone critiques your spending habits, and yeah, maybe you do blow all your paycheck on eating out, buying useless shit, and doing whatever the fuck gives you dopamine. So what? Instead of defending your choices, pivot and say, this isn't about money, it's about priorities. And remind me, when did your priorities become the gold standard? And there you go, now they're stuck justifying themselves, and you're steering the whole conversation. This tactic works because arguments aren't static, they're fluid, messy, and constantly shifting. By redirecting the focus, you're not just steering the conversation, you're grabbing the wheel and driving it straight into their blind spot. The beauty of it, half the time, your opponent won't even realise what's happening until it's too late. They're stuck reacting while you're calling the shots. It's not just strategy, it's psychological kung fu. Still losing? Okay, don't worry, we've got you. The next move will have them eating out of your hand right before you crush their argument.
By yielding in trifles, you can win in matters of importance.
Here's a move that's equal parts sneaky and genius. Pretend to agree, then hit them where it hurts. For example, when Grandpa says, social media is ruining society, you nod and say, totally. Spending hours on YouTube isn't exactly a brain boost, unless you're watching the Let's Rock That Wisdom channel, of course. But hey, isn't this just the latest scapegoat? People said the same thing about TV, books, and even newspapers back in the day. Suddenly, they're agreeing with you without even realizing it. False concessions work because they mess with expectations. By pretending to agree, you seem reasonable, even cooperative. Meanwhile, your opponent starts to relax, right before you drop the hammer. It's like offering them a handshake, then pulling them into a judo throw. It's sneaky, it's brilliant, and borderline evil. What? Still losing? Okay, then I guess it's time to go nuclear. Grab a beer.
A last trick is to become personal, insulting, rude, as soon as you perceive that your opponent has the upper hand.
Yep, you heard right. Said by the man himself. When logic won't work, attack the person. It's a fallacy, but Schopenhauer knew it works. Ad hominem attacks work because credibility is the backbone of persuasion. Schopenhauer understood this perfectly. If you make someone look foolish, stupid, evil, no one takes their argument seriously, no matter how solid it is. The art of being right isn't just a guide to debate. It's a cold, hard look at human nature. Schopenhauer forces us to face an uncomfortable truth. Arguments are mostly not about uncovering truth and seeking understanding. They're about power, ego, and control. And the battlefield, it's not logic, it's perception and emotions. These tactics are weapons, but wield them carefully. Used wisely, they can expose weakness, dismantle arguments, and put you firmly in control. But used recklessly, they can backfire, making you look petty, turning the crowd against you, or provoking the kind of backlash you can't come back from. Every argument is a risk. Just make sure, when the dust settles, you're the one still standing.